Have you ever watched a toxic family member embarrass themselves so badly that no one could save their pride afterward? Because that's exactly what happened one unforgettable evening in Florence. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about dignity, courage, and how a 17-year-old girl taught an entire family what grace really means. Her name is Mia. She's 17, brilliant, creative, and lives with autism. She doesn't always know what to say in crowded rooms, but she feels music in a way most people never will. For weeks, she had been practicing a dance called the Moonlight Waltz, a performance she planned to dedicate to her Aunt Sofia on her wedding day. It was supposed to be her moment, a way to say, "I belong here too." But the night before the wedding, everything changed. One cruel message shattered her confidence and exposed the ugly truth about how some people see her. Still, this story isn't about pity. It's about strength. Because in Florence, under the golden glow of chandeliers and the echo of violins, a girl once silenced by fear found her voice again. And the woman who tried to humiliate her? Well, let's just say she ended up teaching the whole family a lesson she'd never forget. So stay with me. This is The Challenge at the Florence Wedding, where elegance met cruelty, and a quiet girl turned an insult into a standing ovation. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories. They're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. The afternoon sun in Florence dripped through the tall glass windows of the old villa, painting the marble floors with ribbons of gold. Mia stood in the center of the spacious living room barefoot, her pale blue headphones clinging to her small ears. The faint hum of piano keys filled the air. Her arms moved with precision, graceful but deliberate, as she repeated the same sequence of steps she'd been practicing for weeks. It was her version of the Moonlight Waltz, a dance she'd choreographed herself. Each motion told a story. The trembling hands that learned stillness, the uncertain steps that found rhythm. To anyone watching, she looked fragile, almost otherworldly. A figure of pure focus and hope. Her father, Marco, leaned quietly against the doorframe, watching his daughter turn the empty room into a world of her own. He'd seen her struggle with crowds, with noise, with the kind of chaos that weddings often brought. But here she was confident, centered, luminous. For once, she wasn't trying to fit into the world. The world seemed to bend itself around her. Then came the sound that cut through the soft music, the sharp buzz of Marco's phone. He glanced at the screen, frowning as the name appeared, Giovanna, his sister-in-law, the mother of the bride. The text was long, but one line burned into his mind. "The wedding is tomorrow. Do not bring that strange girl. Sofia has done enough babysitting her. I will not let her ruin this day." Marco froze. For a moment he thought he had misread it. But the words were cruelly clear. His chest tightened. He looked up to find Mia standing close, too close. She had seen his expression, and her eyes, wide and searching, dropped to the glowing phone screen. She didn't mean to read it, but she did. Her face went pale, her lips parted slightly as if she wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. The room seemed to stop breathing. "She thinks I'll ruin it," Mia whispered, her voice trembling like glass on the edge of breaking. "She thinks I'm weird." Marco's throat ached. He reached for his daughter, but she had already stepped back, hugging herself tightly. "I knew she didn't like me," she said softly. Sofia was just being polite. "I shouldn't have practiced so much. I shouldn't go." He crouched down, his hands on her shoulders. "Mia, look at me." His voice was steady but filled with anger he struggled to contain. "You are not weird. You are my daughter. You've worked harder than anyone to prepare for this. And if Giovanna can't see how incredible you are, that's her blindness, not your fault." She looked up at him, tears pooling in her eyes. "But she said not to come." Marco straightened, his jaw tightening. "We are going," he said with quiet conviction. "You will wear your beautiful dress. You will dance your Moonlight Waltz. And everyone will remember you. Not because you're different, but because you're unforgettable." That night, after Mia had gone to bed, Marco stood alone in the kitchen, rereading the message. The more he looked at it, the more it burned in his mind. He deleted it, not to forget, but to keep it from haunting his daughter further. Tomorrow, he decided, would not be about Giovanna's cruelty. It would be about Mia's courage. The next morning, Florence awoke under a soft veil of mist. Marco took Mia by the hand and led her into the heart of the city, to a boutique known for dressing opera singers and socialites. The kind of place where fabric shimmered like water, and every dress seemed to whisper a story. The owner, an elderly woman named Signora Benedetti, greeted them with warmth. She had known Marco's family for years, and when she heard what had happened, her smile faded. "Then we shall make sure your daughter shines brighter than anyone in that castle," she said, voice resolute. Mia's eyes widened as rows of dresses surrounded her. Silks, satins, tulle of every color. But it was the emerald green gown that stopped her in her tracks. It shimmered subtly, like moonlight over water. "That one," she said softly. "It feels like the forest after rain." Marco watched her twirl in front of the mirror, the dress catching the light like magic. The tailor adjusted the hem while Mia's reflection smiled. The first real smile since she'd read that message. "Perfect," said Signora Benedetti. "Now the shoes." Mia's gaze fell upon a pair of silver heels, coated in fine glitter. "They sparkle like stars," she murmured. "But Giovanna will hate them." Marco chuckled. "All the more reason to wear them." Then came the accessories, a pair of silk gloves printed with dragons, bold and unapologetic, and a necklace shaped like a prehistoric creature. Each choice was more than style. It was defiance wrapped in color and texture. It was Mia reclaiming her story. Finally, she picked up a massive glitter-covered card from the shop's stationery corner and began decorating it with stickers and silver dust. In the center, she wrote carefully, "Dear Aunt Sofia, I love you. I hope you dance forever." She grinned mischievously. "But Giovanna will definitely lose her mind when the glitter falls everywhere." Marco smiled, half amused, half proud. For the first time, he saw not just his shy daughter, but a young woman stepping into her own light, fierce, playful, unbroken. As evening fell, the sky over Florence turned a deep orange. The city buzzed with anticipation for tomorrow's grand wedding at the ancient castle on the hill. But back at their villa, tension crept back in when Marco's phone buzzed again. Another message from Giovanna. "Don't even think about showing up. I've hired security. Mia's name is not on the guest list." Marco felt his blood run cold. He turned to Mia, who had been sketching dragons on the edge of her invitation card. She noticed his silence. "Is it her again?" He hesitated but nodded. She stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then she straightened up, fire in her eyes. "She hired guards to keep me out?" "Yes," Marco admitted, bracing himself for the heartbreak. But instead of tears, Mia's lips curved into a slow, defiant smile. "Then she's going to see me walk right past them." He blinked, surprised. "I'm not going to hide," Mia continued. "I practiced every day. I made my dress. I even made a card. I'm not staying home just because she's scared of glitter." Marco couldn't help it. He laughed. A full, honest laugh that echoed through the quiet house. He knelt beside her and hugged her tightly. "That's my girl." That night, before bed, Mia stood by her window, looking out at the city lights shimmering across the Arno River. She imagined the castle on the hill, the chandeliers, the music, and herself in the middle of it all, twirling under the gaze of a crowd that finally saw her for who she was. Not as a burden, but as a force of her own making. When she turned to Marco and whispered, "I'm ready," he knew she wasn't just talking about the wedding anymore. She was ready to stop apologizing for existing. Tomorrow, the world would finally see what he had always known. That his daughter, with her glitter and dragons and shimmering courage, was born to shine. The grand castle in Florence glowed like something out of a dream. Strings of golden lights draped over the ancient stone walls, while white roses lined the pathway to the marble steps. The air carried the scent of lavender and champagne, and every corner seemed to hum with anticipation. Guests in tailored suits and satin gowns whispered in admiration at the decor, the kind of wedding you'd expect in an Italian fairy tale. But as the orchestra tuned their instruments and the first guests took their seats, two unexpected figures stood quietly near the entrance, Marco and Mia. He straightened his tie nervously, giving his daughter a small nod of reassurance. Mia's turquoise silk gown shimmered under the lights, her hands gripping a silver clutch that matched her shoes. Her long dark hair, usually tied back, fell freely tonight, framing her delicate face. When they entered, the whispers began. Heads turned. Forks paused midair. Some guests blinked in surprise. Others exchanged looks that spoke volumes. Giovanna, the bride's mother, stood near the grand staircase, dressed in deep crimson lace, radiating authority. The moment her eyes landed on Mia, her smile froze. Then with one sharp inhale, she stormed forward. Who allowed her in here? Giovanna's voice sliced through the room, echoing off the marble. Every conversation stopped. Even the violinist lowered his bow. Marco stepped in front of Mia protectively. "We were invited by Sofia," he said firmly. "My daughter came to celebrate her aunt's wedding, nothing more." Giovanna's face twisted in disbelief. "This is a formal ceremony, not a—" But before she could finish, Sofia appeared, radiant in her ivory gown. She rushed toward them, eyes wide with emotion. Without hesitation, she threw her arms around Mia. "Mia!" Sofia's voice trembled. "You look beautiful. I was hoping you'd come." The room collectively exhaled. For a moment, the tension softened. Mia's lips curved into a shy smile, her fingers still trembling as she held Sofia's hand. Giovanna, however, was far from done. Her jaw clenched as she stepped back, humiliated by the scene. The guests were watching, and in her world, losing control meant losing power. She turned sharply toward the event staff, whispering orders under her breath. Marco noticed but said nothing. He simply squeezed Mia's shoulder. The ceremony began soon after. The music swelled. The bride and groom exchanged vows under a canopy of cascading roses. But behind every smile, there was a storm waiting to break. The storm came during the reception. After the dinner, when the lights dimmed and the first dance ended, Giovanna seized her moment. She strode to the stage, clutching the microphone as though it were a weapon. Her tone was falsely sweet at first, but every word carried venom. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, forcing a smile, "before we move on to the cake cutting, I'd like to say something about family." People turned their attention to her. "Family," she continued, "isn't just about blood. It's about respect, knowing your place." Her eyes flicked toward Mia. "And sometimes people forget that certain boundaries exist for a reason." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Marco rose halfway from his seat. "Giovanna." But she ignored him. "I had hoped for a peaceful evening," she said louder now, her voice shaking with anger masked as poise. "Yet some people insist on turning everything into a spectacle. A pity." All eyes shifted to Mia. Mia froze. Her breath hitched. Her hands began to shake uncontrollably as every whisper became a dagger. "Giovanna, that's enough." Sofia's voice cracked through the microphone, but Giovanna had already gone too far. "You think she understands this day?" Giovanna hissed, her facade breaking. "She doesn't even belong here. This is not some school performance." The microphone squealed with feedback. Mia covered her ears instinctively, her eyes wide with panic. The noise, the stares, the humiliation, it was too much. Her body went rigid. Her breathing became shallow. Then a frail but steady voice cut through the chaos. "Enough." It was grandmother Rosa, standing slowly from her chair, her cane in one hand. She made her way toward Mia, her movements deliberate, regal. She reached her granddaughter and wrapped an arm around her trembling shoulders. "You are a jewel, my dear," Rosa whispered. "A jewel doesn't ask permission to shine. It just does." The crowd fell silent. Giovanna stood frozen, the color draining from her face. Then another voice joined in. It was Luca, the groom. "Mia has more grace in her silence than some of us have in a lifetime," he said firmly. "And for the record, she was always welcome." His mother, Elena, rose beside him. "I raised my son to know the difference between elegance and cruelty," she said coldly. "And what you did just now, Giovanna, was not elegance." The tension in the air shifted. The same guests who once stared at Mia in discomfort now turned toward Giovanna with visible disdain. Someone began to clap, softly at first, then louder. One by one people stood. Giovanna's face burned with shame. Her hand trembled as she placed the microphone down, realizing she had just humiliated herself far more than she ever humiliated anyone else. Meanwhile, Mia still stood by her grandmother's side, her tears glistening under the chandelier. Marco stepped closer and took her hand. "You're okay," he murmured. "You're safe." And then, something remarkable happened. The orchestra, unsure what else to do, began to play softly again, a familiar tune. The Moonlight Waltz. Mia lifted her head. The melody she had practiced for weeks drifted through the air like a whisper of fate. Rosa nodded gently. "Dance, my dear," she said. "Show them who you are." Mia hesitated, then stepped forward. The crowd parted, forming a circle around her. The first steps were shaky, uncertain, but as the violins soared, she began to move with grace and confidence. Every turn, every lift of her arm, every flicker of movement told a story no one could look away from. By the time the final note faded, the room was silent again. Then applause. Deafening, heartfelt applause that filled the entire hall. Giovanna, unable to meet anyone's gaze, turned and walked out of the reception in silence. Mia stood in the center, breathing heavily, her face glowing under the light. Marco and Sofia rushed to her, wrapping her in an embrace. And for the first time that night, Mia whispered, "I didn't need an invitation to belong." Everyone heard her, and they knew she was right. Sofia's heart was pounding as she reached for the microphone that Giovanna had just slammed onto the table. The room was still heavy with tension, a kind of stunned silence that clung to the chandeliers. The bride's hands trembled slightly, but her voice was calm, clear, and filled with quiet authority. "Everyone," Sofia began, glancing toward Mia. "I owe you, and especially her, an apology." The crowd shifted uneasily, eyes darting between mother and daughter. "My mother's words don't speak for this family," Sofia continued. "And they don't define who Mia is. I invited her because she's part of my heart, because she reminds me what beauty really is. Not in appearances but in honesty and courage." Then she turned to Mia, who was still standing near her grandmother, her hands nervously twisting the edge of her shawl. "Mia," Sofia said softly, "I promised you a dance. Will you share it with me?" For a moment Mia didn't move. The shock, the shame, the weight of every cruel word seemed to anchor her in place. But then Marco gave her a gentle nod, the kind that said, "You can do this." Mia took a deep breath. And then she stepped forward. Sofia reached out her hand, and together they walked toward the center of the ballroom. The orchestra seemed to sense the moment instinctively. The violins began their slow, tender introduction, the same melody Mia had practiced for weeks. The Moonlight Waltz. The lights dimmed slightly, leaving only the soft glow of the chandeliers above, and the reflection of candlelight dancing on the marble floor. The first notes of the piano rose, delicate, fragile like ripples on water, and then Mia began to move. Her turquoise gown shimmered as she turned, the silk catching every flicker of light. Her silver shoes, the same ones she had chosen with such pride, glimmered like fragments of stars. Every step she took was measured and intentional, her movements fluid and graceful, as if she were painting the air with emotion. Sofia followed her lead, twirling gently beside her, but it was clear to everyone, this was Mia's stage. The room fell utterly silent. There was something almost unreal about the sight, the contrast between the chaos that had erupted moments earlier and the serenity now unfolding before their eyes. Mia wasn't just dancing. She was reclaiming her voice. Every movement said what she hadn't been able to say in words. "You tried to silence me, but I am still here." As the music swelled, a soft mechanical click came from above, the confetti system that had been prepared for the couple's first dance. But instead of rose petals, it released a cascade of shimmering silver glitter, the same kind Mia had glued to her invitation card, the one Giovanna had once called childish. The particles rained down like snow made of light, catching in Mia's hair, on her shoulders, on her gown. It was as if the universe itself had decided to finish her performance with its own blessing. Gasps filled the room. Someone near the front whispered, "It's beautiful." Even the staff froze, captivated by the sight of the glitter falling slowly over the marble floor. 1,000 tiny stars reflecting off the chandeliers. When the final note played, Mia ended in a quiet bow. For a second no one moved. Then, as if a wave had passed through the hall, the applause erupted, thunderous, heartfelt, unstoppable. People rose from their seats. Some wiped their eyes. Others cheered. Sofia took the microphone again, her eyes shining with tears. But before she could speak, Luca, the groom, stepped beside her. His voice rang clear and warm through the speakers. "Thank you, Mia," he said, smiling toward her. "You brought magic to this night, real magic. The kind we'll remember long after the music stops." The audience cheered again. Marco looked at his daughter, overwhelmed with pride, while Rosa dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief. For Mia, it wasn't just applause. It was acceptance. The sound filled her heart like sunlight after a long winter. But somewhere in the corner of the room, Giovanna was fuming. Her face was pale, her lips trembling with restrained fury. Everything she had tried to control had slipped away, the order, the image, the narrative. Instead of being the perfect hostess, she had become the villain of her own daughter's wedding. She turned sharply, calling over the event manager, a tall man in a black suit named Ricardo. Her voice, though low, was trembling with rage. "I want them gone," she hissed, pointing toward Marco and Mia. "Now. I don't care what it takes. They've humiliated me in front of everyone." Ricardo's expression didn't change. "Signora Giovanna," he said carefully, "the bride specifically requested their presence. It would be inappropriate to remove them." Giovanna's nostrils flared. "I don't care what she wants. I am the host of this event." At that moment, a deep, weary voice rose from across the hall. "No, Giovanna," said Carlo, her husband, standing from his seat near the center table. "You were the host. Past tense." Everyone turned. The orchestra stopped playing. Carlo walked slowly toward the center of the room, his face calm but filled with decades of exhaustion. "I've stayed quiet for 25 years, he said evenly. "I've watched you humiliate people, manipulate situations, and pretend it's all for appearances." He turned toward Mia. "But tonight you crossed a line." Giovanna blinked, momentarily speechless. "Carlo, not here." "Yes, here," he interrupted, his tone firm. "Because the whole world just saw what I've known for years, that your cruelty has no limits." The crowd stayed silent. Not even a whisper broke the stillness. "You humiliated a child," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "A child who came here only to dance for her aunt. Do you have any idea how small that makes you?" Giovanna's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were of anger, of a woman watching her carefully built reputation crumble. "You're making a scene," she muttered. Carlo smiled sadly. "No, Giovanna. You made the scene. I'm just ending it." He turned to Ricardo, the manager. "Please make sure my wife gets her things." "Carlo," Giovanna gasped, her voice sharp with disbelief. "You can't just." "I can," he said simply. "And I will." He faced the guests, who now looked at him with quiet respect. "I'm sorry, everyone. This was supposed to be a celebration of love. But love doesn't humiliate, doesn't shame, it doesn't destroy." With that, Carlo gently took Giovanna by the arm. She tried to pull away, but his grip was steady, not forceful, just final. The crowd stepped aside as he led her toward the exit. The sound of her heels clicking against the marble echoed through the hall like a metronome of defeat. No one clapped. No one spoke. They simply watched. As the grand doors closed behind them, the silence that followed was strangely peaceful, the kind of quiet that only comes after a storm has passed. Mia stood there, still in her shimmering gown, watching the doors slowly shut. She felt a mixture of sadness and relief. Part of her wanted to cry, but another part, the stronger part, felt free. Sofia wrapped an arm around her. "You were incredible," she whispered. "You didn't just dance, Mia. You healed this family tonight." Mia smiled faintly. "I didn't heal anything," she said softly. "I just stopped hiding." Marco joined them, his eyes glistening. "That's all it ever takes, sweetheart," he said. "One brave step." And as the orchestra quietly began to play again, Mia looked up toward the chandelier, where the last bits of silver glitter still floated down, and thought for the first time that maybe, just maybe, she truly belonged. A month had passed since the night that changed everything. Florence had returned to its ordinary rhythm, the bells of Santa Maria del Fiore ringing through the crisp morning air, the scent of espresso drifting from street cafes, the Arno glistening under the winter sun. But for Mia, life no longer felt ordinary. It felt new, fragile, but beautiful. At school, she sat before her classmates, fingers nervously tracing the edge of a note card. Her teacher, Signora Valenti, had asked the students to share a personal story about courage. When it was Mia's turn, the room quieted, not out of pity but respect. She took a deep breath. I once went to a wedding, she began softly, where someone told me I didn't belong. But then I danced, and I realized belonging isn't something people give you. It's something you decide for yourself. A hush lingered for a second. Then, unexpectedly, her classmates began to clap. Not polite applause but real thunderous clapping that made her cheeks flush and her heart flutter. Even Matteo, the boy who used to tease her for being different, stood up and said, "That was awesome, Mia." For the first time, she didn't look away. She smiled and said, "Thank you." That evening, Marco picked her up from school. When she told him what had happened, he grinned so wide it softened the years etched on his face. "You see," he said, "the world doesn't change when people understand you. It changes when you stop hiding." 2 months later, an envelope arrived at their apartment. It was cream-colored with gold edges, and the handwriting was unmistakably Giovanna's. Marco hesitated before opening it, but Mia's curiosity won. Inside was a letter. Beautifully written, perfectly phrased, but hollow. "Mia, I suppose I owe you some kind of apology. Emotions ran high that evening, and perhaps I was misunderstood. I only wanted the best for my daughter and her special day. I hope you'll forgive me in time. Giovanna." Mia read it twice, then handed it back to her father. "She didn't say she was sorry," she said quietly. Marco nodded. "No, she didn't." Without another word, Mia tore the letter in half. Marco joined her, the paper splitting in gentle, deliberate motions. When they were done, the fragments lay scattered like snowflakes on the kitchen table. Mia smiled faintly. "That felt good." Marco chuckled. "Forgiveness isn't always about the other person," he said. "Sometimes it's just about letting go." And so they did. By December, Florence was glowing with Christmas lights. Garlands of evergreen hung across the Ponte Vecchio, and families filled the piazzas with laughter. Inside Marco's home, warmth radiated from every corner. The fireplace crackled, the scent of cinnamon and pine filled the air, and the sound of clinking dishes echoed through the small dining room. This Christmas felt different. There was no Giovanna, and no one seemed to miss her. Instead, the house buzzed with genuine joy. Sofia and Luca arrived early, carrying gifts wrapped in gold paper. Grandmother Rosa sat by the fire, humming an old Neapolitan tune. Even the family cat, Lorenzo, wore a red ribbon around his neck. When Mia walked into the room, everyone turned toward her. Sofia hugged her tightly. "Mia, you're our Christmas star," she said. "You gave this family a reason to be honest again." Later that night, after the laughter had softened and the candles had burned low, Carlo arrived. He looked tired, his hair a little grayer, his suit a little looser, but his eyes were clear. Giovanna hadn't returned home since the wedding. He didn't mention her. No one asked. He approached Mia with a small box in his hands. Inside was a silver pendant shaped like a crescent moon, resting on a velvet cushion. "Mia," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you probably don't know this, but I used to be a coward. I let your aunt and others control everything, what I said, what I felt, what I believed was right. But that night, when I saw you dance, I realized what courage looks like. It's not loud. It's not proud. It's just pure." He paused, taking a deep breath. "So I've decided to start something, a scholarship fund in your name. The Moonlight Grant. It'll help children like you. Children who see the world differently, who need people to believe in them." Tears welled in Mia's eyes. "For me." "For you," Carlo said softly, "because you reminded me that kindness and strength can live in the same heart." The family raised their glasses that night, not to wealth, not to success, but to peace. The peace that comes when truth replaces pretense, when love replaces control. The snow began to fall outside, coating the rooftops in soft white. From the window, Mia watched it in silence, her pendant glinting faintly in the firelight. She felt something she hadn't felt in years, belonging. By spring, life settled into its quiet rhythm again. The gossip about the wedding scandal had faded into a distant memory, just another whispered tale among Florence's high society. But for Mia, its echoes remained, not as pain but as purpose. One afternoon, she sat on the terrace sketching designs for a new dance costume when Marco joined her with 2 cups of cocoa. He sat beside her, watching her draw. You know, he said, I still think about that night. About how everything could have gone wrong. And somehow went so right. Mia smiled. It didn't go right, she said. It just went honest. Marco looked at her, really looked, and for the first time he saw not a child to protect, but a young woman who had found her voice. You've grown up, he murmured. She laughed softly. A little. They sat there for a while watching the wind move through the olive trees. Then Mia said something that made Marco's chest tighten with pride. You know, Dad, she began, I used to think I was a burden, that I made things harder for everyone. But now, I think I was just different. And that's not a bad thing. He reached over and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. Different, he said, is just another word for extraordinary. Mia looked down at her hands, steady, confident. I'm still scared sometimes, she admitted. But I think being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about showing up anyway. Marco nodded. You showed up, sweetheart. And you changed all of us. Later that evening, as the sun set over Florence, Mia stood by the window again, her pendant catching the last light of day. The memory of that night in the castle no longer haunted her. It glowed within her like a quiet fire. She whispered to herself, almost like a prayer. I used to think I was a mistake. But I'm not. I'm me, and that's enough. The words hung in the air like music, soft and certain. Somewhere deep inside, she could still hear the echo of the Moonlight Waltz, the song that had once been a performance, but had become her truth. She turned to her father, who was setting the dinner table behind her. He caught her gaze, smiled, and said, What are you thinking about? Mia smiled back. Just how far we've come. He raised his glass of water in her direction. To you, he said. To the girl who turned humiliation into light. Mia raised hers too. And to the people who stayed when it mattered. Outside, Florence glowed. A city of golden shadows, love and loss, endings and beginnings. And in that moment, as the first stars appeared over the rooftops, Mia knew her story wasn't about a wedding or a scandal. It was about something far greater, the quiet courage of being exactly who she was meant to be. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe. Not for me, but for every girl who was ever judged for being different. Because sometimes the most beautiful light doesn't come from perfection, but from the hearts that were once broken and still chose to shine.